Old Magic's hard to watch, and I'm not just talking about video quality. Magic has over 30 years of competitive history and the game has changed over time. Going back and watching older games today is surprisingly difficult. When I made my video on Alexander Haynes' miracle run at the Pro Tour, I kept having to pause and explain how things used to work. Because if you didn't play back then and you're getting into Magic now, a lot of it doesn't line up with how Magic works today. I think there are a few main culprits making it hard, so let's break them down. The first issue is where cards are placed on the table. For a long time, there weren't any real rules for this, and even in Pro Tour finals you could see different board layouts. Everyone kind of developed their own version of what the board should look like. A lot of old school players even learned from old material, like Magic the Puzzling, where lands are literally placed in front of the creatures. Around 2015, this started to change, but not for the players, for the viewers. They wanted a consistent layout so viewers could actually follow the game, so they started enforcing a standardized layout on camera in tournaments. You were still allowed to play differently off camera, but that didn't last. At Grand Prix Lyon, Gabriel Nassif would lose a game where a Dryad Arbor, a card that looks like a land but is actually a creature, was grouped with the lands. This resulted in some controversy. This was one of the main triggers for Wizards to start enforcing a clear board state for everyone. Lands stay closest to you and non-land permanents go in front of them, and if something is also a creature, it has to be with the creatures. Another big one is the legend rule. If you pause this board state for a second, Alexander Hayne already has a Geist of Saint Traft in play, and John Finkel is about to play his own copy. What do you think happens next? If you started playing more recently, you'd probably expect both to stay, but in Old Magic, both of them went to the graveyard. Today, each player can only control one copy of a legendary creature at a time, but your opponent can control the same one just fine. But back then, the game checked the entire board for duplicates, not just your side. So if either player had the same legendary creature, both copies went to the graveyard. Players would even run legendary creatures in their sideboard just to answer their opponent's copy. It's not like Haynes' control deck would usually want this aggressive creature in the sideboard, but the legend rule turned it into both a body and removal. This was changed in M14 because it created awkward gameplay and only got worse as more legends were printed. This is an aspect of the game that I'm happy to see removed. The redirection rule can cause some real confusion when watching older tournaments. If you were Joshua Cho here and you hit a Bonfire of the Damned off the top, would you expect today to be able to hit Alexander Haynes' Tamiyo Planeswalker with it? It doesn't say Planeswalker anywhere on the card, so you probably assume it can't, but in Old Magic it absolutely could. When Planeswalkers were first introduced, most cards couldn't target them. Cards like Lightning Bolt at the time said target creature or player. So instead of rewriting a bunch of cards, they added a rule. You'd target the player and then redirect the damage to their Planeswalker. However, eventually they removed the redirection rule. It was too confusing and they wanted cards to be self-explanatory. So cards that used to say creature or player were changed to any target, and things like target opponent became target opponent or planeswalker. The problem is of course that the physical cards didn't change. So a lot of older cards that haven't been reprinted still read as if they work the old way, unless you happen to know to read the Oracle text. This means that Wizards has had to avoid this issue going forward, where two cards have the exact same text box but do different things. Another rule that is just completely gone is mana burn. Before 2010, if you had unused mana in your pool, you actually took damage. Players had to think twice about cards that generated mana, and cards that could easily spend that extra mana had more value. However, in the M10 update, Wizards decided to remove it. They said it added complexity without really adding enough strategic value. It was so rarely a factor, and as the game evolved and more mechanics got introduced, this was one of the things that got cut. You can still experience what playing with mana burn felt like if you play Yurlok in a Commander game. When mana burn got removed, Wizards posted an article that they were already looking at maximum hand size as the next rule to go, which 15 years later is pretty funny to read. Another big change in the M10 rules update was the removal of combat damage on the stack. If you had two 2/2 bear cubs and your opponent attacked with their problematic 4 toughness creature, trading with a double block sounds pretty good. However, combat damage used to go on the stack first, which meant players could respond before damage was actually dealt. So after damage was assigned, your opponent could cast Unsummon on their own creature, return it safely to hand, while you lost your 2 bear cubs. This system was introduced at the same time as the stack in the 6th edition rules update in 1999. Creatures with sacrifice effects became much stronger as well. A card like Mog Fanatic could block, assign combat damage, and then sacrifice itself for another point of damage, removing 2 creatures. Wizards eventually removed this rule in 2010 because while it created clever tricks, it also made combat look confusing and unintuitive to players who didn't already know how it worked. Today, the game constantly checks for creatures with lethal damage and destroys them before players get priority. These rule changes are a big reason why old Magic is hard to watch. I did say in the beginning of the video that I'm not talking about video quality, but it's honestly impossible to ignore. From old TV broadcasts and early streaming sites with compressed footage, broadcasts that look rough by today's standards, and glare so bad they had to remove sleeves, sometimes you can barely even see what's on the board. If you compare that to today, high quality broadcasts with clean overhead views. And then there's the UI. Cards are highlighted, life totals are clear, and then you even have people tracking the players' hands so you can try to predict what lines the players will play. So yeah, the visual side is a massive part of it. But the rule changes matter too, because when the layout is clear, the cards do what they say, combat works the way you'd expect, the game becomes a lot easier to watch, and a lot easier to play. If you enjoyed watching this video, consider subscribing to the channel. If there's something I should have included, let me know in the comments below. Big thanks to my Patreon supporters, and if you want more old Magic next, YouTube thinks you'd like this video up next. Thanks for watching.